Hello and a very warm welcome to everyone to EWJ Podcast, where we sit with educators across the globe to discuss up-to-date approaches of the theme in focus, followed by some actionable teaching strategies, tips, and a secret of the trade. This will be inspiring for the listeners and help them to enhance their teaching and learning experience. Your host today is Maria Zahir, and this episode we are talking about pedagogical aspects of online teaching with Mr. Fayyaz Malik. How are you, Mr. Fayyaz, today? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Miss Maria, and thanks a lot for Educational Webinar Jam to giving me this chance to come here and talk about my experiences of online teaching. Thank you so much.
It's our pleasure, Mr. Fayyaz. Mr. Fayyaz is a vice president of KSAALT TESOL here in Saudi Arabia with extensive experience in teaching. He has been actively participating and presenting at various professional platforms on a variety of academic topics. Mr. Fayyaz, we will start with our most interesting topic through your experience is what challenges did you face while teaching online?
Teaching online was a completely new experience, and as like if I talk about myself, I went there just with 2 weeks of training. So what happened there? I tried to use Zoom before I went to my real class, and I talked to my colleagues about it, like about their experience who did it before me, because they had a class like just one day before me. So I did these kind of things. I asked my colleagues. I did one experimental session with some other people to know how it works, how the things work, and how the business goes on, and all that.
Mhm.
But on the day of the first class, it was a kind of surprise for me. Why? Because what I saw on the screen, it was all like black boxes with
Yeah.
just names of students in the middle. And then like for a few minutes, I was like speechless what to do, uh, because I couldn't see. It was the first time that
Yeah.
I couldn't see my students. So that was for the time being, that was baffling. So cameras were off. I was talking to black screens. Then what happened that so I started my lesson, and I shared my screen, I shared my activities, I shared my slides, something like that, and the session like came to an end. uh, the first day I didn't talk to my students.
Mhm.
They didn't answer anything,
Okay.
and I felt very bad about that. this,
Yeah.
this is what happened the first day. So then the second day, what happened that the next morning, a similar thing was going to happen. And then like I started getting this strange feeling that exhaustion, that a feeling of ineffectiveness, that I'm not effective. Students are not talking. They are not unmuting themselves. They are not switching on their camera and something like that. Uh, so then I stopped there. I tried to talk to the students. There were a lot of reluctance. There were a lot of hesitation. And then like with the same kind of half-baked sentences from students, reluctant answers to my questions, the
Mhm.
session came to an end.
Yeah.
So I was rather like disappointed with my own performance. So my first, and that feeling of ineffectiveness turned out as like sudden burnout. So yeah,
I think we
I
were all
talked to.
feeling that, Mr. Fayaz, because we all were sent into this emergency teaching with very little
Exactly.
experience of teaching online. And I think we
Yeah.
all felt that bandwagon very soon, as soon the excitement died out.
Yeah.
I agree with you there. Yeah, please go
Yeah.
ahead.
So then I asked my IC, my instructional coordinator, for help. And he
Mhm.
suggested me talking to my students. This is what all he said. He said, okay, talk to your students. Right. Okay. Then, okay, the third day I went back to my online class, and then I really took one whole hour talking to them. I stopped myself and I asked them, okay, how are you? Okay, who is who? How you were sitting? Are you on a sofa? Are you on a writing table? Are you in the bed? Tell me about your room. Tell me about your study setting at home, what you were doing. Is it a laptop or a phone that you were attending classes on, and something like that. That that 1 hour really opened up students to me. They started talking,
That's
and
great.
then they told me many things. They told me many things about my pace,
Mm,
uh, how I was teaching, my voice, my pauses, and the content, the amount of information that I was conveying to them. So, and that told me a huge amount of truths about myself, actually. So, so uh, then this is what I did. I slowed down.
mhm.
I slowed my pace. I and every day I spend 10 to 15 good minutes to talking to students. I talked about weather, I talked about their previous day, I talked about their sense of burnout, their ability to do the homework, their ability to read from the screen, doing exercises from LMS or something like that.
That's
So
interesting.
yeah, and that really started a good communication between us. Then every morning we started with talking to each other, warm greetings, and after I talked about their study settings, their study tables, and how they were dealing with all these problems,
Hmm.
the very next week many of them switched on their cameras, and they wanted to share their writing with me. They put up their piece of paper in front of the camera, and they wanted to show me what they were doing, and that
Interesting.
was really great start.
Nice. That sounds really interesting and a good experience, uh, as because we all have been going through this roller coaster ride, and it is very challenging. Even if you have loads of experience, you still have that hurdle coming up, right? It's still a bump
Exactly.
that you have to cross, and it all depends on the cohorts you're teaching, and this leads to also motivation in the classroom. So,
Yeah.
how were you able to motivate your students? I think the small talk helped. Like you said, you started with the small talk every morning, and that opened up your students to engage more and communicate more. In terms of activities, how did you keep them engaged and motivated in your classroom?
Exactly. That's the more interesting part. Like after that talk, now I felt the need that I need to do more. I need to move beyond that small talk and that, warm discussion with the students. So I started introducing tools with them, and then when I introduced these tools, many of them, many of those tools, of course, they were new for me, because before that, our all focus was on work with paper and pen, and putting everything in students' binders, in students' portfolios, and
Yeah.
checking those portfolios every day. But
Mm.
now the whole thing was changed. So when I wanted to introduce the tools, I wanted to use them myself first. So
Yes.
I tried them. I tried them. And at that time, one thing that really helped me a lot was YouTube. I
Mm.
spent hours and hours watching YouTube videos on how to use LMS, how to use this feature, that feature, how to use chat, how to use forums, how to use Padlet.
Yeah.
Uh, then, and it took me almost a week before I introduced my first tool to students.
Mhm.
So uh, because I really wanted myself to get acquainted with them, to practice with them, to play around with them, and to be more confident myself about the use of them before I pass them on to my students.
True.
Because it was them who were going to work with that, and it was I who were going to assess their work on those tools. So
Yeah.
I wanted both sides at the same level, at the same page. So, but one thing that I focused more on was the aspect of freedom when I
True.
talked about
That
the
that that's
tools.
the best thing, I
Yeah,
think. We have to
yeah,
give them that freedom to select what they really want for their learning.
exactly. So I focused on that aspect of freedom of thought and freedom of action, the different things that they can do on the tools. Like on some tools, they were able to use videos. On some tools, they were able to share their paragraphs, and they were able to assess each other or correct each other's work, peer correction. So this freedom, I emphasized upon that again and again, and I gave them ample time, enough time to practice with that, to use that, and like helping each other. So, like for example, during my classes, they were telling each other in Arabic, like, okay, do this, do that. Now you can switch on that. You can click on that, and so and so. So this interconnectivity became possible only because they knew that they were free to work with that.
True. Yes,
And that
that's
free
correct.
yeah that freedom gave them more options to come up with more creative abilities to work with those tools. So um, on if I talk about the learning management system that our institute is using, I first started using chat function.
Right.
Yeah, it really created a sense of conversation. This
Yeah.
chat was quick, and
Yes.
it is and as you might have already used that. So you know that it's very quick to set up. So, and it really went on like WhatsApp chat. So I use it for vocabulary practice. I use it for brainstorming practice for the types for different topics of writing.
Yeah.
I use it for speaking sessions. And then the second one that I use were storyboards. What I did, I actually took different storybooks,
Mm-hmm.
and I clipped them only for their images,
Mm-hmm.
and then I shared them on chat rooms, and then I asked students, okay, what do you think? What might be happening here? What happened first? What happened next? And then the next picture, and then they
Interesting.
started writing about next picture.
Yeah.
When when we were finished with that, then I showed them the real story. And then we compared and contrasted, like what was their story and what was the actual story.
That's
And like there
interesting.
were
Must be
many,
very interactive there in the classroom, isn't it? Yeah.
it was actually, and it came up with like very surprising things. The first story I did was Newspaper Chase.
Mm-hmm.
That book has like big pictures, like more than half of the page is covered with a picture, and then only 3 or 4 lines of description, which are mostly dialogues.
Yeah.
So, and that went very well. So
This is something we need more for online teaching, is less text and more, visuals to students to see and
exactly,
interact with, isn't it? Because it's hard
exactly,
for us to read from the screen. We were used to reading from the books or papers, and suddenly when we went online, it was hard for us to read loads of text online. And even for us as teachers to mark their writings was very challenging, wasn't it, in the beginning?
exactly. The second thing that I found my students enjoyed very much was the choice of videos. So I asked my students to choose a video, watch it thoroughly, and design 5 questions about it. So, and then we did a practice of designing questions. So I
Mhm.
told them not to make any like yes and no questions, and I told them to make like imploring questions or exploring questions or follow-up questions with
Mhm.
how, why, something like that. So, and I told them not to make not to ask very small kind of details which nobody can notice in a
Yeah,
video or
yeah.
in a documentary. Yeah. So, and there, students came up with wonderful videos about and I gave them complete freedom. I told them, okay, you can choose anything from politics, technology, history, or you can say that environmental discussions or TED Talks or something like that. So they came up with videos from BBC, from TED Talk, from National Geography or something like that. And then they really asked good questions.
Mhm.
And another thing that really helped me in connecting with my students and like my getting them motivated was surveys.
Oh,
Surveys.
interesting. What kind of service, Mr. Fayyaz?
These were well, first I tried the surveys on the Zoom itself. The
Mm-hmm.
Zoom itself. Zoom has a survey feature, right? But those were like they were easy to structure, but I was not able to save them
Mm-hmm.
unless and until I took a screenshot for them or something like that. So what I wanted students to keep the survey questions and the results like with them, and I want them to be able to go back to them whenever they wanted.
Yeah.
So what I did, I started searching on LMS itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and on LMS, I designed it. I designed the surveys on everything about reading. I like, okay, for example, I asked them, how is the reading? Is it easy? Is it difficult?
Mm-hmm.
What makes it more difficult? Is it vocabulary? Is it the idea? Is it the length? Something like that. That allowed students to think about the text itself. That allows students to think about their own thinking process.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that engaged them more with the text, with their activities. And then where for peer correction, for peer evaluation, for example, after a student presentation,
Yeah.
I designed another survey and I asked students, okay, how was the body language? How was the tone? How were the slides?
Interesting.
What was the amount of text in a slide? Was it too much or something like that? So they really like found it interesting and engaging. They found that they were able to contribute something meaningful and to get engaged.
That's very interesting, Mr. Fayaz, because, it gives the learners autonomy as well, the sense of, taking the learning in their own hands and reflecting of what the teacher has just, because we as teachers are just scaffolding their learning in their classrooms. We want the learners
Exactly.
to really build on those blocks and, take charge of their learning themselves. And I'm sure it must have been very interactive and very engaging for your students. Anything that
What I
did,
actually
yeah, go ahead,
Yep.
please. Please go
Okay.
ahead.
I have, what I felt that anything that students can do, I shouldn't do it for them, because if I do that, if
Yes.
I do that, it would be spoon feeding, or it would be like something like that I'm trying to provide them the cues, the solutions, the answers. So and uh, actually I discussed it with some of my colleagues, and they told me that okay, and we actually sat together and we discussed, okay, how we can make sure that what uh, how not how not to provide that kind of support which student can do themselves. And we actually came up with lots of good things about that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like in that regard, I'm really thankful to some of my colleagues like Mr. Martin, Mr. Samir. We had, like at the start of this online thing, we had meetings, our personal meetings, and they went very well and they were really, really fruitful.
That's
So
nice.
like, in that process, I actually learned a lot. And then when I was confirmed about my own learning, I conveyed it to my students.
Yes, I'm sure. We all think we have mastered it all, but when it came to in our hands, we were
Exactly.
all like trembling to our knees, right? So, what's next? We need more things, more skills to upscale our teaching during this online practices. Interesting. Something that didn't go as well as planned. Would you like to share anything? And
Yeah, like for example, in the beginning, when I was working with LMS, I started uploading those, PDF pages.
mm-hmm,
They didn't go well. For example, I uploaded the images of the PDF pages of exercises and activities.
Mm-hmm.
I found that for lower grades, for beginners, for lower intermediate students, they
Yes.
were very static.
Mm.
Those pages were very static. There was like, first of all, some PDF books were like, blurred or, faded
Mm-hmm.
or something like this. So then I really started, and then students actually told me about that. I was following a routine of,
Yeah.
like, for example, vocabulary discussion, topic discussion, reading, and finally writing.
Mm-hmm.
So like after like in one of the courses, in one of the reading and writing courses, students told me that that was quite like monotonous, and monotony came from less from the routine I was following, but more from the content or the things that I was uploading for students to read, to see, and to practice with.
Mm-hmm.
So they for example, one student came to me and he said that the teacher was like, what we see in videos, what we see in other things, that's more colorful, more
Yeah.
colorful.
Yeah.
And so what I did then, I started changing it. I started making all activities like interactive, where
Yes.
students could select or write
Mm-hmm.
themselves, and that helped them a lot to get connected with the exercises. And then I started uploading like images or short videos, very short videos, which went with the lessons. So, for example, I wanted to do a reading about, for example, Venice. So
Mm-hmm.
I selected a very short 3 minutes video about Venice and how people live there and how the city and how there are waterways like that. So I uploaded the video, and
Mm-hmm.
then I uploaded that reading. Within the reading, I dropped all the, I took out all the verbs, and then I created empty spaces there, and then
Mm-hmm.
students were able to choose from them. So
Interesting. Yeah.
they connected text with video, they connect text with images,
Yeah.
and then I started using this paint. There's a feature, there's, I don't know, application of
Yes.
paint in the windows, and
Yes.
I started making really colorful titles for my readings. Yeah, and
Okay.
that really generated a sort of interest among students. Yeah,
Yeah. So we had to be
actually
very
I realized
visual
that
about things.
students exactly these
Yeah.
students are visual.
Yes.
These students are actually visuals. They have their devices in their hands.
Mm.
They can go YouTube, they can go any other websites, they can go to Netflix and so many things, and those things are full of color and movement,
No
moving
doubt. Yes.
images.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's very interesting. We are learning a lot from you, and I'm sure we will be able to reflect after today how we can improve our online teaching from your interesting experience you're sharing with us today.
Thank you.
So we are almost coming to the end of the podcast. We would like you to share your top tips for instructors in a virtual world. Your three best top tips.
First of all, as I experienced this myself, I would like to say that discover your tool, play with it, test it
Yeah.
yourself before you like you show it to your students. And then choose. Every tool has a lot of features. Some features work for you, some do not. Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So according to your limitations of syllabus, according to your limitations of skills that you're teaching, or your institutional uh, limitations. So according to that, you need to choose which features are going to work,
Mhm.
choose them, try them, and get to a level of perfection and rely on them. And get an expert advice, as I did, as I
Mhm.
did. I still remember the second day of online classes, and I couldn't use, my students couldn't hear the audio that I wanted to share. And
Mm.
Right at the moment, I sent an email to all my colleagues.
Yeah.
And then they started giving me suggestions. And before the mid of that lesson, I was sharing the audio with my students. So get help, get expert help. And okay, another thing is that try to know your students, even if they are online. I know that online teaching in itself is a completely different area of academics where teachers and students, where teachers and attendees should not be there by force. They should be there by choice.
Yeah.
It's true. But when you are there in any situation, whether it is an emergency going back to online session, try to know your students. Try to know how they feel being online. What are their issues? What are their problems? Create a conversational setting as a part of your everyday lesson. That will build up the connection that you want, that you're looking for. And set your lesson routines not rigidly, not so rigidly that you find it hard to add new things into it. Keep it loose. Keep it in such a way that it allows you and your students to add new things, new activities in it from time to time, so that they're not monotonous.
Great.
And
I love that. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
just two more things. Can I? Do
Please
we
go
have
ahead.
time for
Yes.
that?
Yes, of course. Please go
Right.
ahead.
One more thing. Engagement is not always gaming. Engagement doesn't mean that it has to be an exciting game, or yes, games are a
Thank you.
valuable
Thank you for bringing
tools.
this up, Mr. Fayyaz. Thank you for
Yeah,
this. Yeah.
games are valuable tools. Games are valuable to no doubt
True.
about that. And games have an absolute power to engage students. But a well thought of lesson plan with all the parts complementing with each other, well connected with each other, with a purposeful connection and link, that will definitely engage students, even when there are no games in it. So,
Yeah.
so you can use any tools to create different parts of lesson get connected to each other, whether it's an image, whether it's a video, whether it's your questions, a survey, or whatever, or even a chat session. But
Yeah.
a well-connected lesson will always get your students engaged to that. And there's no doubt about that. Again, anything that students can do themselves, don't do it by yourself. Even if it is loud reading, designing questions, suggesting a title, finding answers, anything. If students can do it, let them do it. And wait for them. Don't feel impatient that, okay, I'm running out of time, I should give the answer. No, you need to wait. You need to stop yourself, so that, and you will see. And there's a golden rule, like 10 seconds or 10 to 15 seconds wait. And students take time to think and answer. And in online sessions, it can be maybe longer. So don't be impatient with the answer, jumping into students' discussions. Let them talk, let them think, let them analyze themselves. And my last tip is, if there is any way you can involve students in handling the class management issues, let them do it. For example, you want them to choose a book. So, okay, have a discussion about that. What kind of book they want to read? Is it going to be about history? Is it going to be an adventure or something like that? So let them choose that. So a small part of class management, hand it over to the students. For example, search for a website, selecting a video, selecting images for the new lesson. Ask them to share them with you, and they will be happy. They will feel freedom. They will feel engaged. That's all.
Why not? Why not? Some excellent tips for our virtual world teachers. We are grateful to have you. We have 3 attendees with us, and Jessica is agreeing with whatever you have said to us a while ago. And we have Zubash and Brenner joined us. Do you have any questions for Mr. Fayyaz at this moment? You can write in the chat box and we can communicate it for you now. Those who have joined us later, this session is recorded and we are going to upload on our website soon, and you'll be able to hear all the insights that Mr. Fayyaz has shared with us today and some very helpful tips. So one thing that really clicked us today was to give your learners the autonomy, keep your lesson plans very flexible, that you can mold it according to the day or the time. The things sometimes don't work around it. For as we as teachers and educators are always ready and open to tweak the lesson according to our own way things are going on. Thank you so much, Mr. Fayyaz, for joining us today and enlightening us with your experience. And we
That
have
was my
learned a lot
pleasure.
from you.
And thank you so much for giving me this chance to share my ideas. Yeah,
Thank you so much. Take care of yourself, and we hope to see you in our future podcast. Bye for now.
sure, sure. I would love to. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye bye.